Hello.
Hey, Didier?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, awesome. Okay, we got it working.
Yeah, this was tricky because the I actually found the email, but it was kind of hidden a bit.
Man, I'm sorry about that. We'll have to give some feedback
No
to the
worries.
webinar people. How you doing?
Yeah, good, good. What about you?
Doing well. Good to meet you in person. Finally. Well,
Yeah.
not in person. Can be.
That's much, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, how are things at Intrinio? Everything going well?
Everything's going well, yeah. Just busy, the end of the year gets a little crazy trying to fit everything in.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's really cool that you do these podcast sessions. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you for the invite.
of course, it's a lot of fun. I find people really value just like a open conversation, like just kind of a no holds barred advice and tips and kind of peek behind the curtain a little.
Yeah, makes sense.
So are you guys fully remote too?
Yeah, yeah,
So are we.
yeah.
Have you always been that way?
You, yeah. Been that also because of the open source. We hired most of the people that were contributing for the project. So, it was from that standpoint, it was already hard to have everyone in one place.
We had something really similar. We used to actually be kind of centralized in Florida, and we had like an engineer base out in Colorado. But after COVID, right, you're just hiring people wherever, so it just
Right.
naturally kind of shifts you into
Yeah.
a remote place.
So where are you from now?
So I technically am from Wisconsin, but then I lived in Florida for 10 years. And now I kind of split time between New York and Colorado because I'm a big skier. So in January I'll
Nice.
be headed out there. Yeah, our CTO and some of our engineers are kind of centralized there. So we do some like kind of leadership get-togethers and stuff out in the mountains sometimes. So
Nice.
do you have any concentration or are your people kind of everywhere?
Portugal is probably like we've got 6 people. We've got another 6 in the US, but I feel like Portugal, because it's so small, you can almost consider it like a concentration.
Yeah.
It's like probably the size of California, pretty much.
Yeah,
But yeah.
cool. So you got multiple time zones to work with.
Oh yeah. I'm the most west, so when I wake up, like a lot of the folks have already pretty much done most of the things through the day. So I always have like a big stack of messages to read through to know what happened and what's going on,
Yeah.
um, which is fun.
Where are you located?
I'm in the Bay Area.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
I moved this year. I used to be in London, but yeah.
Gotcha. All right, we got people that have joined already, but we'll give it till after the start of the hour to get going.
Sounds good.
So just for the purposes of future webinars, so you got 2 emails then, and one was like your panelist email and one was a normal?
Yeah, so the one I used was actually, I think it was an old one. I was looking for go to webinar, and yeah, so this one, you're a panelist, was from October 31.
Oh, they don't
So
send you an update email with your panelist link? All
no,
right,
no.
I'll write
All
it
of the other three are a reminder that I'm registered. Probably I shouldn't have registered because I registered because I didn't know if I needed to, and then he linked through my email and he understood that I'm a speaker or
Yeah.
not, so I registered. But yeah, I didn't get any reminder.
Well, I will write a strongly worded letter to the GoToWebinar folks.
To be fair, it wasn't too bad. The only thing is that they mentioned that you can be a panelist, I think, by on the browser, but I don't think you can. So that's I also had a delay because I had to install their software.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Thank
Can
you. Sorry you had to be
can
the
you
guinea
hear me?
to figure out the
No, it's
panelist.
okay. Is it?
Yeah.
You're lucky that I'm a tech guy. Probably someone
Right.
else would have struggled more.
As tech CEOs to not get this stuff
Yeah.
right.
So this is saying that he detected a new hardware.
What was that?
Do you want to see? I got a message from the app saying they detected a new hardware for audio, but I don't know what it's talking about. Can you hear me properly?
Yeah. Yeah, everything seems
Okay.
fine.
Should be fine.
Okay, it's noon, but we'll give it another 2 minutes maybe if people have, you know, in the age of Zoom, everybody's meetings run over 2 minutes and then they're perpetually 2 minutes late for everything all day long. So
Yeah, that's the same rule we have, 2-3 minutes.
yeah. I actually been trying to do like 45-minute meetings or 50-minute meetings instead of 60 minutes to give people the buffer.
Yeah. I actually changed. I actually started usually on 45 because I felt that like 1 hour sometimes feels a bit long. 45 is more early, but now I've been doing actually 30.
Mhm.
And it's crazy because when you actually have 30, like you go more to the point faster, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, and what I do is I tend to do 30 minutes, but I have actually 45 to 1 hour. So if I actually needs to run over, like I don't mind. But sometimes just because you have that time, like you don't really talk about important things soon enough.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a good point.
but
Most meetings are useless, right? And you end up wasting 80% of the time anyway. So forces you
yeah.
to stay on the agenda. I like that.
Yeah, that's another thing that I have my like schedule link that anyone can book, and it's a 15-minute call. So
Mm,
sometimes I take those, and those are pretty efficient.
yeah.
So those are nice because people will come in and do just very brief introduction of like 3 minutes, and then there's not a lot of time, so they go straight to the point. And I don't accept like sales call and stuff. It's usually more like, okay, I want to help, or I want to bring OpenBB to my university or something, but those tend to be like straight to the point, and I enjoy those.
Yeah, those are even better. Shorter the better.
Yeah.
I started to like miss phone call meetings during COVID too, when Zoom got so crazy. Like there's something about like just being able to get on the phone with somebody versus having to like, I like to walk around sometimes, get the blood flowing. Nobody does that
Yeah.
anymore. Nobody does phone calls.
No, that's true actually. That's a good point.
Yeah. Man, things have changed. I remember like years ago, I had some investors who did like workout meetings with me. Like I've had people be like, maybe at the CrossFit gym, we'll do it over get a quick workout in. And it was actually kind of fun, but like can't do that stuff anymore. Not with
No. That's
things.
funny.
Those were pretty wild. Kind of a trend, I feel like, for a short period of time.
Yeah.
All right. I feel like because this is lunchtime, we might have people that pop in over time, but to respect everyone's time who is here, I think we should dive in. So hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm Rachel Carpenter, the founder and CEO of Intrinio. Thanks for coming to our Fintech CEO Fireside Chat. We do these every couple of months. I interview and talk to different Fintech CEOs in the industry. And today we are joined by Didier Lopes, who is the founder and CEO of OpenBB. I've been dying to have this conversation. He's got a really interesting company, a really powerful open source financial terminal product that we're going to dive into today. So we're just going to have an open dialogue, open discussion, talk through some topics. And then also we have in the GoToWebinar panel the opportunity for you guys to ask questions. So feel free to pop any questions that come into your mind throughout the conversation into there, and we'll keep an eye on it and answer some of those towards the end. So feel free to use that. But with that, I'm actually going to pass it over to Didier to just give everybody a brief overview of kind of who you are and what OpenBB is working on.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me here, Rachel. It's my pleasure to be here. And yeah, so my name is Didier. I'm a co-founder and the CEO of OpenBB. OpenBB, for those of you who don't know, is an open source financial platform / ecosystem. We have multiple products comprised of the bot, the terminal, the platform for quants, and recently we announced the Terminal Pro and the Excel add-in for enterprise. And yeah, that's a brief overview about myself.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So the thing that is so intriguing to me about OpenBB is the open source part of the business model, right? The strategy.
Yeah.
It's never, I don't think, really been done before. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? I don't think anybody's ever built a financial research tool ever that's been open source. So can you talk to us a little bit about where that idea came from? Like what caused you to want to go the open source route in the first place?
Yeah, so I guess at the end of the day, it came out of need. So my background is not finance. My background is engineering. So, you know, when I started being interested in the financial, like doing investment research and finance overall, I didn't have the know-how compared with people in the financial field. But one thing that I didn't like is that when I was doing research, it was really time consuming. So I was losing a lot of time doing like, you know, screenshots, putting things in a Word document. And then the more I was learning, the more time I was spending time doing research. And like coming from an engineer background, like that lack of automation really, really annoyed me and it frustrated me a bit because at the end of the day, it's all data. Do you know what I mean? Like if I'm looking at, for instance, I don't know, Tesla, I don't know, insider trading, then Tesla fundamentals. I want to be able to automate whatever my research process is so that in a month, if I'm going to use the same ticker even, I can just hit a button and just do all of that in one go. There's no reason why I need to spend. And who says for Tesla in a month, says for Apple on the same day. But all of that was very manual. And so I was very frustrated with that. And I looked for tools that I could like automate the research angle. And I didn't really find anything. The best on GitHub that I found was Yahoo Finance, but then it was limiting for me because Yahoo Finance package is to represent whatever is provided by Yahoo Finance, and I wanted to add more. There was things that I was interested that Yahoo Finance didn't provide, and so what I did is I wanted to start building this tool, and I spent a bit of time, looking, okay, where am I getting the data? And because I have that engineer background, I actually knew how to even scrap the data if I didn't have access to it. So that was my first step. Is like, okay, I'm gonna scrap the data. But the thing is that I realized that like scrapping data, as good as it sounds, like it has its own problems, which is like there's no one maintaining that on the site, and the place where you're scraping the data for, they don't care about you because you're scraping their data, so they will change the architecture of the website and break all the endpoints, and so that became like, you know, annoying soon. And then the next step for me was, okay, let me see what data providers there are there. And there are a ton of data providers. And after looking at a few of them, what I realized is that their go-to-market is very similar, which is that they will have a free plan, and then they have like a paid tier, sometimes 2 or 3. But the interesting part is that at the free plan level, not all of the data providers provide the same access to the data. And I was like, that's perfect for me, because I can sign up for multiple free API keys and have access to all this data. And if there's one in particular that I like, and they have more data that I'm interested, or they allow me more requests per minute, or even more time in the past to get access to that data for, I'll just pay for it, and I'm happy with, because it's already part of my workflow. And so with that in mind, then I created the GameStone terminal at the start, and then it was to a point that I was actually quite happy with what I had in terms of automation. But again, I didn't have the financial background, and so I was like, I want people, because I only knew what I knew, right? So I wanted people to be helping me in adding data that I didn't know that I needed, because at the end of the day, I was learning while I was trying to do this for myself. And that's why, like, I always knew that it had to be open source, because that's the best way to get like ideas from all over the world, like people that even have better like coding practices than me. And I just wanted to learn when I made it open source.
Yeah, I love that. I actually just wrote or launched a YouTube video about why scraping financial data from the internet doesn't scale. So I should have had you on that video, because I mean, I did the same thing when I founded Intrinio. Originally, we were trying to build an app, and then we were scraping data for it, and we were like, this doesn't work, but the other stuff's too expensive. So yeah, I totally resonate and get that background of having to scrape it all together. It's a nightmare out there. And I also love that you're engineer first. Like I talk about this a lot, about how, like, no offense at all to the finance people out there, but finance is so much easier to learn than engineering, right? Like, it takes a decade to become a really good engineer. And like, my engineers don't have backgrounds in finance, but they've learned really quickly. And now they understand the finance word really well. And it's so much easier to do it in that direction than the other way. So I commend you on that. And it's a really interesting and cool kind of outlook that you have, right? It's like, let's get the best of the best minds coming up with good ideas out there and bring it all together. I mean, it's interesting, and it's never been an approach that the larger data vendors and terminal companies have taken. And so there's obviously got to be some disadvantages to the open source approach, that the reason they wouldn't have done it. So what do you think about that, right? Like, what are the benefits of it open source, but like, what are the potential downsides that you might see too?
Yeah, so creating a business model on top of that open source is extremely hard, not because of the tech itself, but because of the data. Because although you can get the API key from a data provider as a user, you can't redistribute that data. You can't even license for display. So basically, when you get the API key, you are on your own in a way. So that is why, if you actually use the OpenBB terminal today, what happens is you install an app on your machine, and when you have access to data from any of the data providers that we support, you actually your laptop does a request to the endpoint of the data vendor, which then provides you the data to your machine. So it never passes through OpenBB. We have no, what we do is the software, we package it even for you, but there's nothing that OpenBB is taking on there. And the reason is because we don't want to be liable for that data, because we are not paying for this cost. And so building a sustainable business model with the terminal to start with, it would have been really hard because of that component. Now, there's things that we could do, right? We could focus more on the interface and have a better interface and still use the API key. But then what we soon realized, talking with enterprise users, is that the API key management only takes you so far. Most of the financial folks would prefer to pay a much higher price tier and not have to, to play with API keys, unless there was any external data set that they wanted to have access to. For that, they are okay to have a bit more work, because they put the value on having that additional data set. But for things like fundamentals, historical data, those are things that they expect to be as a given, I think, because of the overall state of all the financial apps, research apps today, that they usually provide this for free. I mean, if you pay a small cost,
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, if you think about it, like, that's one of the benefits of this model, right? Is that these bigger companies that are trying to put together terminals are just buying all the data, and they're paying all the redistribution fees, which is a huge sum of money that you're able to avoid and then subsequently put into other areas for the end users, right? So yeah, maybe they have to sign up for their own data. There's some kind of out of the box data that comes that's expected, as you said, but then the rest of that value goes straight into the platform and improving that. So you're not having to spend all this money that your competitors are on data, right? That's That's pretty brilliant. Any other thoughts on kind of like why you think the bigger guy, I mean, there's probably a lot of reasons, but why you think some of the bigger guys haven't taken the open source approach?
Well, I think it's because at the end of the day, you're also giving your alpha, right? Like
Yeah.
when we talk with like big companies and enterprise, well, like for instance, what we built with the Terminal Pro, they end up having their own version internal. And the thing is that they are okay with reinventing the wheel at certain points because they don't want to give that alpha away. But like, you know, we talk with quite a few people from enterprise and firms, quant firms, and they are using, for instance, OpenBB platform, right? And we spent a lot of resources to build that. And, you know, they are okay, for instance, in taking it and in using it. But for instance, if their firm would have something similar, they don't share it because they consider it as an IP and they don't want other firms to have what they have. And so I felt like, you know, at least that's my experience from coming from outside. Like the financial industry is very closed, very competitive. Whereas I feel like the engineering world, like people just want to help each other out and innovate faster, grow faster. And I feel like OpenBB kind of brought a bit of that to the table.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, how are you experiencing that community, right? I mean, how big is the community, and like how do you define that, right? Like who are your contributors? What is it like working with them? It sounds like generally speaking, you've got a very broad and very innovative and very nice and contributory community out there, but who are these people, right? And how does that
Yeah.
community grow?
Yeah, it's hard to tell you like what is the community because it's so broad.
Yeah.
I spoke with analysts from like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs. I spoke with students at university. I spoke with PhD students using it to do like thesis research. I've spoke with machine learning engineers at Bloomberg using it to do like machine learning because it's open source and it's all Python based. People at BlackRock. So it's like very very vast, and not just in terms of who they are, but also what they use the platform for, the terminal. You know, when I started, it was mostly equity data, and then soon people started adding like forex menu, crypto menu. So that by itself, like augmented the amount of people that were looking at the terminal, because then some were looking into the crypto side, others were looking more into the forex side, and then not just that, we started adding toolkits on top. So I think this was a mistake that we did at the beginning, which is like as an engineer, when people ask for features, because we're engineers, we can do it. So we thought, okay, let's do it. But we started like diluting a bit of our value proposition, which was like having access to all that data and standardize it in one place. So we started building these toolkits like portfolio, and then portfolio optimization, and then econometrics for students, the forecasting, reports, dashboards, options like customizable like dashboards as well. And so we kind of started going into these multiple directions, but then it was really really intense in terms of like resources to spend to maintain all of those toolkits, additional menus. And then the people that came in are also not paying customers. So like they would ask, oh, you know, you should add this feature, or the typical sentence that we hear, oh, if you add this feature, you can charge me like $500 a month and I'll pay for it, you know. And then we add the feature and like, there's no $500 a month, you know what I mean?
I do. Unfortunately, I do. Yeah.
So yeah, that's been fun.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that. I mean, it's like you're gathering the masses, right? PhD students, you know, people that are working at arguably your competitor, like all over the place. I mean, it's no wonder I feel like you get to the point where, yeah, it's open source. There's some danger in that, but at the same time, the open source full version is just going to be consistently growing and getting better. And so why wouldn't everybody be using that one anyway in the
Yep.
long run, right? Well, let's switch gears for a second. I'm curious about shifting the conversation a little bit into fundraising, because I have a feeling that you might have had some of the same challenges, if not even worse than I did in fundraising for Intrinio. I mean, we started, you know, close to 10 years ago now, but at the time, it's the irony is that people didn't understand what an API was at that point in time in finance. Like they just, I mean, most people, most investors at least, were just familiar with the Bloomberg terminal, and they thought we were trying to recreate the Bloomberg terminal, and they didn't understand what an API was. And it was just like a beat your head against the wall in the early stages of kind of like the fintech growth, where all the investors were like, you're never going to beat Bloomberg. And I was like, I'm not trying to, we're an API company. Like they just didn't get it. And so the frustration there in the early days when you're kind of getting started in fundraising and learning about the fundraising process, it can be frustrating when you're doing something that's very different. The irony being the really different approaches are the ones that make a lot of money and create ROI for investors. But I'd imagine that you had similar challenges because open source scares a lot of investors. I would guess that it's a tricky, scary, you know, API to Bloomberg terminal is nothing compared to open source to the traditional model, right? And so talk to me a little bit. I mean, I know you actually ended up finding some open source specific investors, which is incredible. So I'm curious if you can tell our listeners a little bit about that process, that pitch, kind of how it was received, what that experience was like, and tell us a little bit about your open source investors.
Yeah, so you're gonna find that funny because a lot of people actually message me and ask me about like how did I do fundraising, like tips and tricks, and I tell them I'm actually not the best person to help you with that. And the reason is because when I started the terminal, I didn't have intentions to build a business. I was literally just building this tool for myself. Like previously, I had the only thing I had done in terms of entrepreneurship was starting like a clothing company with some friends. But that was about it. You know, I was really happy with being an engineer, learning coding, and so I started the terminal to basically solve my own problems and be able to do better in investment research. I wasn't really thinking about the business at the time, and so after I launched it, we went viral on Reddit, Hacker News, Fast Magazine did a post on us. We kept growing really fast in terms of like GitHub stars, contributors. It was really hard to manage all the issues that people were raising and feature requests. And so we kept working on it, and we created the Discord, which grew really fast. And I think today we have like over 14,000 people there. And then at some point, we got a message from this guy called Joseph Jacks from OSS Capital. So he actually found us, and he said, "Oh, I really like I've been watching you since you launched." Because one thing that JJ does really well is like he's actually on GitHub like every day looking for companies for outsource. He doesn't delegate that. He actually spends his own time doing that. He has his own like triggers and he's looking for companies, which is like is really impressive. So he saw us on the day we launched, and basically it doesn't reach immediately, right? Because I mean, you need to distinguish between okay, what's just a fun project and what's something that can be you know, a big business. And so he kept seeing the reception of the community, growing features. He would try the app every now and then, and he saw the growth. And so a couple of months after, he reached out to us and he said, look, I'm a partner at OSS Capital, and we invest on open source funds, and I think you have a really big opportunity at your hands. And so we ended up chatting with him. At the time, it was actually James, the co-founder, which was someone that started contributing to the project really early. And because there was so many PRs and I had a full-time job, I messaged James, and without knowing like nothing about him, I messaged him and I asked him, do you want to be a main maintainer of the project with me? Because I actually don't have enough time in a day to go through all of these tickets. And he was wrapping up his PhD in quantum physics, and the labs were closed because it was COVID. So he was like, yeah, sure, why not? I want to go into finance anyway. And so, yeah, so James was on his honeymoon in Napa Valley, and he ended up meeting JJ for 20 minutes or so.
How does his wife feel about that?
Yeah, so I think the compromise they made is that he wouldn't go past 20 minutes. So he was literally like at that time just before the Alcatraz tour or something like that. So it had to be just like that really short period of time. But at the end of the day, like we just wanted to see like, is this for real? Like, because we didn't come from that background and we didn't know what fundraising was, or even like starting a company, having employees. And so we talked with him, and then I talked with him. I was in London at the time, so I talked with him and I told him, like, you know, what my vision for the project at the time is. But you know, after thinking about it, like I thought that there's a business opportunity. I mean, Bloomberg, for instance, makes like, you know, 10+ billion a year, right? And so if we see so many people coming together into an open source financial tool, there must be a opportunity around it that we can monetize. And so the way I think about it at the end of the day is like you're fundraising to figure out what that opportunity is at the seed round level, at least, right? At Series A, you probably need to have some financials and show that you can be profitable or whatnot. But yeah, that was like our story. So I didn't have a lot of like even the pitch deck. I talked with someone that joined us early on, was also like a director at Workday from the Bay Area, so he had a lot of experience. So he helped us like create a pitch deck, so that's like the OSS Capital was a bit more reassured about their investment. And then he had contact, so he contacted the our fractional CFO today, which was like employee number 3 of Dropbox. So she had tons of experience on how to set companies, and she does that for a living. And so we started going like pretty fast in that sense. So yeah, we're just lucky, to be honest.
Well, I don't know if lucky is the right word. I mean, building a good product is the best way to start a company, right? Like building something based off of a need. I mean, it's a very similar story to us. We couldn't afford data, so we went out to try to make data easier. And it's the same thing. You needed a solution, and so you started building it. There's a clear problem that you're solving, and that's the best way to start a company. And it's even better when investors come to you, and you don't have to do the whole horse and pony show. So that's awesome that they found you. And kudos to them for being on the GitHub channels to source for opportunities. That sounds like you guys found some pretty awesome investors that get what you're doing and support it, which is amazing. So congrats on all the success so far. Which leads me to my last kind of question and topic in this open source section here, which is the fact that you guys are an open startup, which is really interesting. You put all of your metrics open for the whole public to see online, which is so against what every other privately held company does, right? Like just the fact that all these investors are always on the hunt for private company financials, right? Like finding private company financials is something we get asked about all the time, and it's impossible because everybody holds it so close to their chest, and like PitchBook is the only company who sells it. Like there's a lot of value in not letting people know what your metrics are. At least that's how the world has been operating. And so it's so fascinating to me to see that you guys have said, fuck it, right? Like we're going to put it all out there. Is the impetus behind that to stay true to your open source type mentality? Is that kind of where the idea came from?
Yes, and I think every time we open source a metric from the company, we think about why we are doing it. So we don't do like everything. For instance, salaries, there's something that we don't do, and we thought about it, but there's no benefit. Like the cons outweigh the pros, because like we humans are just like competitive, I think, at the core. And for instance, and knowing the salary of your peer would make you overthink it, and it doesn't benefit the company. So we don't put that there. Revenue is probably something that we're not going to put, because then that invites like competitors, and invites like knowing what are the price target, the price costs that we are making with big companies, which may impact us in the future. But all of the other metrics, I think that like people asked us at the end of the day, so like how many users have we got, how many bot command requests have we done since the start. Those are things that we get asked quite a lot of time, and even from the team. So having it open in a single page where everyone can have access to, I think it just makes us like more transparent, and the community also feels that they are part of it, because when they contribute to the project, they can go onto that page and see how many people are using it. For instance, hub users, I think we've got now 28,000, and so that if you're gonna, one feature that we're announcing soon is that you can have your own profile page on the hub. And so that way you'll know, okay, there's 28,000 people that have created a hub account. And so those people that I can, reach out to them or check their socials. And so I think that movement's kind of started on the indie hackers like level, and then call.com, a startup that we are close with because they are invested by OSS Capital as well. They did that, and I think they really like paved that wave. And like looking into that, I was like, okay, this is the right thing to do, So that's kind of how we think. One thing that I really like about that page is the team feedback. So basically, I was thinking of ways, because working remotely is hard. Like you need to make it work. It's not just okay, let's decide whether we have an office or not. It doesn't work that way. Making your strong culture on remote work is hard, and who tells you that it isn't? They don't know what they're talking about. And so one of the things I feel is like a lot of companies, like they say that, you know, we're remote work, and they say that it works well, but like, where's the proof? Like, where do you get the feedback from the actual employees working on the company that they are enjoying that experience? Because from what I hear sometimes is that employees, they like when they mention like, okay, I'm remote work, and I'm like, okay, and how do you feel about it? You know, they enjoy their lifestyle. But like,
Yeah.
do you enjoy working for a company while you are working remotely? That's very different. I mean, sure, you enjoy spending time with your wife at home or husband and then dogs, but then do you actually enjoy working for the company? And that's something that we don't hear a lot. So what we did is basically we have this monthly survey for employees that we ask, like, you know, recognition in terms of growth opportunities. It's like these 14 factors based on something that someone at work they wrote when we call it like the employee feedback. And so we ask that survey, and then they reply from 1 to 10. And then we do an index, which basically averages everything. And every month we see how we are doing. And so that basically provides me the feedback I need, and the leadership of our team needs, to basically make changes to improve that working experience. And I think that that's one of the greatest things that we've done, because yeah, we've improved on a lot of small things that we wouldn't have without having like a mechanism to like a feedback loop.
I bet. It's a super innovative approach. I mean, I've never seen anybody do that before, and it's commendable. Do you find that it holds you more accountable too? Like, are you a competitive?
Correct.
You're competitive. Well, you have to be. We're all competitive if we're founders of companies, right? Like, if you got
Yes.
your user growth numbers out there, you better grow your damn users, right? Like,
Yeah.
do you find that it holds
Exactly.
you accountable too?
Yeah, not just me, but also like the other team leads. So, for instance, one of the fields is management support. We've got a couple managers, so you know that's not me. And then at the end of the day, because those metrics are open, what I tell the team is like, look, like when you are replying to this form, like you have no benefit from putting a low mark, because that will affect the way people see company. But you also have no benefit in putting a high mark, because then nothing is going to change.
Yeah.
So you are as accountable for these results as I am, even though you are participating on it. So if someone puts, for instance, okay, I don't know, growth opportunities, they put, or I don't know, strategy, they put like a lower mark. It's not enough to just put that lower mark. They need to kind of try to reach out. Or for instance, if I see lower mark, I'll see, okay, how can we do better in terms of like strategy, for instance? And there's a lower mark. But in this case, like, I don't really know what this person needs. So I'm going to try to communicate more the strategy, or I'm going to try to, or I started, for instance, office hours, you know, to basically have people. And now, for instance, they have less excuses, for instance, to put like a lower mark on strategy, because I have office hours where they can come and we can talk and we can have an open discussion. But without that feedback, like, how do you know?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's cool because you're I just admire the commitment to the mission and the strategy, right? Because in the same way that you're kind of acknowledging the fact that the smartest ideas and the best ideas out there for our platform might not be engineers that even work here, right? Like, this is
Yeah.
open source for that reason. You're taking the same approach with your own employees, which is like, people that are in the leadership team don't have all the answers all of the time. Like, the best ideas come from different parts of the business. And so it's cool that you've kind of stayed true to that thought process, which I love. So quick reminder for our listeners, you can ask questions if you've got them. We're covering a lot, so you may not have any, but you do have the ability to ask questions that we can answer in the app. So just a reminder there. And then we'll shift on to talk about what I call the elephant in the room, which is the fact that you're kind of going after competing with the Bloomberg terminal here, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's the elephant in the room. It's something that a lot of people have tried before and nearly everyone has failed at. I mean, you can argue whether or not everybody has failed at that, but not very many people have had success trying to replicate or replace or augment the idea of the financial terminal before, which historically has been a flagship product owned and managed by the company Bloomberg. So let's talk about that a little bit. First of all, is that part of the name?
No.
Okay, tell us what the BB,
So
about the name then.
yeah, so when we started, the name of the terminal, actually, the first commit I did to the code, I called it stock market bot or something stupid like that, and I hated the name, and I knew that I had to change,
Yeah.
and I like Elon, and I was an investor at GameStop terminal, and then Elon one day tweeted GameStonk, and I was like, GameStonk, I like that, you know. And then I was thinking, GameStonk terminal, that's it, that's perfect. And that, I think that same day I changed the name of the project to GameStonk terminal. And then this was before it was open source, because I was still working on the architecture of the code. And then I made it open source with that name. And I think that's one of the reasons also it went viral, is because a lot of people, being like GameStop investors, they related with the name. For instance, I mentioned earlier that Vice magazine did a post about this. And the interesting part about that post is that they said that our terminal, the GameStop terminal, was a terminal to do research on GameStop. And I was like, what? Like,
I
you
love
know, you can do on
names.
anything. Like, you know, I just knew that they didn't bother to open the, you know, the app. I was like, you know, like, sure, fine. Anyway, so, and that kept being the name. And basically, then when we talked with JJ, he mentioned that, you know, we need to have a less mimi name, because, you know, this was fine to grow the user base and as a side project. But if you want to build a business, like this name associated with GameStop is a bit mimi. And so James and I, because he was also an investor in GameStop, we wanted to stay true to like have on the name stocks that we were like losing money on. And so we were both big investors on BlackBerry. I mean, big. And we were losing a lot of money on BlackBerry, and the BlackBerry ticket was BB. And then because we were open source, we wanted to have the open, and so I became OpenBB.
Okay. I mean, I love it because it's sneaky, a little
Yeah,
bit sneaky, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's like
exactly.
people's initial reaction is they're building a terminal and you know, so, but it's good. I mean, it's a cool story about how you came up with it. So I think, at least from my perspective, because I'm running a financial data company, right? And I work in the industry every day and talk to everybody. The reason a lot of people say that it's impossible and nobody will ever stop Bloomberg from being the one who is the leader in the terminal space is the chat, right? And so you see these companies like Symphony popping up to try to outsource or, you know, compartmentalize just chat on the side. So it's kind of a two-folded question because there's two different angles I want to go at this with. The first being kind of, do you agree with that, right? And how are you thinking about chat? Is chat part of the platform? Like, is that going to be worked in somehow? Because, or are there any other reasons why you think other people haven't been able to lodge themselves in as the alternative to the Bloomberg terminal? Maybe we'll start with that, just the chat piece and
Yeah.
the how do you win in that space?
So I would actually say that, and most people actually say that the shot is the killer feature, but I don't really agree. I would rephrase it. I think the killer feature is not the shot, but it's the amount of people you can reach on the app. So I think that the shot by itself is not enough. You need to have a network, and Bloomberg has that because they've been building that for so many years. And so let's say that we were to add, or any financial company for that purpose would be to add the shot. I don't think that would be nowhere near enough to beat Bloomberg, because Bloomberg has all of these network of individuals. You can reach out to anyone there, and that's just like, you know, the supply demand, like that you have everyone that you want on one place, and then that makes you want more the tool. But in the early days, so I was a retail investor, right? And so the first post on acronyms can be really rough. Like people give very negative views, which for me I think is the best feedback, because like taps on the back like won't take you far, but actually these kind of negative thoughts actually makes you think harder about what you're building. And so when I launched the GameStop terminal, like very primitive days, like everyone was commenting about the chat. And then I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, well, that's actually true. Like as a retail investor, I was talking with some of my friends, and we were kind of learning together and sharing what we were learning, sharing our resources. And I was thinking, like, yeah, like there should be some chatting interface, because I mean, part of the research for me is spending time talking with my friends about what I'm thinking and learning from how they're thinking, and we kind of divide to conquer a bit in a way where they learn from other things that they've seen on other apps. But then from my perspective, I was thinking, let's say we're talking on Discord or Telegram, right? It didn't really make sense that if we're talking there about finance, we had to opt on the platform, whatever that platform may be, to basically have access to financial data. And so what we built in response to that was the bot. And so the bot basically allows users to have access to financial data right from their the chat app that they are using. And so, for instance, right now, if you see, this is my screen. This is the shot with my mom. And basically, what I do here is that I have access to financial data right from my phone. So I just write a command, and it's an endpoint on OpenBB servers, and we pay for the display rights of this data, and then you have access to that financial data. And so that was a bit of our answer.
Directly into the chat. The
and
data
it's baked into the chat. Yeah, and you can invite it to any chat on Telegram, Discord for free. We're not even charged, because for us this is kind of marketing in a way, because it has the OpenBB watermark. And yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool. We had a question that came in, but I'm gonna get to that in just a minute, because I'm curious here about retail versus institutional, right? I think Bloomberg is pretty exclusively institutional because it's very expensive, right? And they've made a lot of money that way. And I know you guys started with the GameStop, and you were a retail investor, the retail trend, and I'm sure that was a great way for you to onboard, like taking advantage of those trends and everything that was happening, like post-COVID, to get a lot of retail users on board. But the money is in the institutional users, right? And so is that part of the plan? Do you have institutional users? And then also, are there any challenges around like compliance when it comes to those users, right? Like these financial institutions are locked down in terms of the rules. Anything open source scares the shit out of them. So is there an institutional user strategy? Do you have institutional users, and how do you think about that kind of compliance roadblock in that area?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple questions in there. I'll try to reply my best. If I miss any, let me know.
I'm sorry.
So, no, that's good. It makes me think. That's good. So yeah, I'm a retail investor. So when I started building the terminal, I was building it for retail investors because that was the category I fit in. And so I felt that there was more people like me. What I realized after a few months is that I'm actually more of an outlier, and people don't spend that much time doing research. And so kind of, I think after a few months, I realized that there's not a big market on the retail investors for research. There is for trading, but for research, people are usually not really paying, or not paying a lot. And I mean, there's a market, it's just not nowhere close to what, like, Bloomberg has built now, like not even close, nowhere. And so another thing is that at the beginning, we're using the terminal. What we saw was that actually people that were sticking around mostly on it on a month-to-month basis were people at Goldman Sachs, at JP Morgan, and like financial analysts. And when would they use it? They would use it on the weekends, or at the end of the day when they are home and they don't have access to a terminal and they want to check something for them, for their personal investments. And then the other side is academia. So students were using it a lot, because now and this was during COVID, they no longer had to be on campus. I mean, there was Bloomberg Anywhere, but now I think it's no longer in place. But basically, they don't need to be in campus. They don't need to queue in order to have access to financial data. Like, the reality in the US is not too bad, but in Europe it's horrible. We're talking about 1-2 Bloombergs per thousands of people. Is wild. And you need to queue. And then the export rates for the data get rate limited, so it may happen that you're on the queue and then it's your turn, and there's actually, you can't export the data because at the end of the day, the crazy part for me is that they actually don't want to sit there for hours. They actually just want to download the data, and that shouldn't be that hard for students wanting to just get the coursework done. And so the way we think about it in terms of the open source terminal right now is pretty much like an academia play, and because we get no money from it, we also not paying for any data, and then the students themselves, or even the university, they can go either just ask the students to sign up for the API keys for the data providers, or what has happened in the past is that we talk with someone at the university, a professor, and he actually goes talk with the data provider, and he pays for like $30-40 for like his class for the month, to have access to data. And that's like a much better like initiative in my opinion. And so then we realized that, okay, we need also, the thing is, the terminal, the open source version, is a command line interface. So for like financial like professionals, it can be a bit gimmicky, while people that are a bit more on the tech side, they like that side of things, because you can run things really fast. You can create like a pipeline of commands, and that outputs like a lot of data. But that's not good enough for enterprise. So our next step, and I think this is gonna also talk about how we compare about Bloomberg. Our next step was like, one thing that we like is not just the fact of being open source for the sake of being open source, but is this open ecosystem where you can build your own things and have full control of what of the app. And so when we talked with funds, one thing that we realized is that everyone has a Bloomberg or Refinitiv, a FactSet, but also everyone had a custom solution on the side. And that was very interesting to understand. And then that custom solution would vary a lot. So if we're talking about a small fund, they would like use Streamlit, which is not like really finance based, but allows you to create a small dashboard. They would use sometimes a notebook to do like a report. If you talk with bigger folks, they would sometimes like use their own, create their own custom solution and spend like millions on it, on the maintenance, on the training. And the reason for it is because if you want anything additional to Bloomberg, you can't call them and ask for it. It doesn't work that way. And not only it doesn't work that way, but like you don't want it to work that way, because a lot of times you get access to these external data that for your company is an edge. And so you want to bake that into your research experience, but you can't do that.
Yeah.
And so they need to build these custom solutions. And so what we thought is like, let's build Terminal Pro to be that site custom solution that you can, you have this user interface. We pay for the very basic data tier. We want to enable a data marketplace underneath it so that you can connect with any data providers that you want through an API key that you pay. But more importantly, we allow you to bring any data onto the app. And so when I show the Terminal Pro to quants, they get really excited, because I basically show them that I can create a backend for it and provide that data to the app, and it just works. It just renders in the dashboard perfectly. And
Right.
even connecting with like Snowflake, ClickHouse, Supabase, Elasticsearch, you can connect to any of them, and then just because it's just data, it's just numbers. So we just need to make it easy to render onto our app. And this is where we are targeting now more enterprise customers.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I mean, love the data marketplace idea, because we don't sell data to individuals, but you're helping the data providers monetize those markets, which is we love that.
That's exactly correct.
Yeah,
That's
so
exactly.
I like the idea of the universities, right? Like those students will grow up to be professional users one day.
Yep.
And it's really good progress that you guys have got the institutional users coming home and using it at the end of the day. That's huge. But what is the strategy to get them to use it at work? Is that a strategy? Like you said, you're working on the enterprises. Like, is there a strategy around that?
Yeah, so the terminal, the open source version, there's no strategy in terms of monetization. It will always be free project. What we are doing though is the terminal itself, the open source version, is powered by the platform, which is basically just these data standardization and aggregation of data. So for instance, if you want historical data, you have like access to like 6 different data providers, including Intrinio, right? And so, but when you have access to it, and historical, but all the others are the same, you have access to a couple of fields that are standardized. So the data frame field structure is always the same. And then if you are outputting more data than the what we consider to be the standard, we also allow people to have access to it. But we standardize that. And the reason why that's important for us is because that platform is used on the Pro.
Yeah.
And so even though we're not making money on the terminal, like people contributing to the project will basically enable more connection of endpoints to different data vendors, which we then can hook into the Pro and serve for the enterprise customers. And at some point, we want to like lower the access for Pro to maybe even like small, high net worth individuals, or even retail one day maybe.
So essentially, the version that you're envisioning being used at the professional institutional level isn't technically open source. It may start by getting features from what has been open sourced, but then it will be, that's the angle for making it secure and safe. The question that came through is, partially answered that, but the question that came through was, can conventionally open source software companies have challenges making money while serving a big population of users at the same time? And so is that kind of the approach? Is, yeah, we'll have this, it's almost a freemium model, right? Like you'll have this open source model, but your angle up into the institutional market is where you're going to make the money for the business.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I was at the Open Core Summit last week, and actually I did a tweet about this, and I was like, the only negative thing that people say about open source is the monetization. That is art. But past that, there's actually no downsides. Yeah. And I really stand by that. So that comment, like, pretty much encompasses that. So if as an open source company, if you can figure out the monetization, then it's all like there's no negatives from it. And so from our perspective, the Terminal Pro, the only thing closed source is actually the interface, because the platform is fully open source, which means that in theory and in practice, like people can build their own Terminal Pro because they have access to the same data we have access to, with the difference that we control the interface. So we build the interface that we think is the optimal for teams of analysts and quants, right? But then what else is open source? The widgets. So we allow people to create their own widgets. That's fully open source. So you know how you can create the widgets. The backend for the app, that's fully open source. So we have like a backend repo that you can learn, or you can build a backend for the Terminal Pro that's fully open source. You know, the documentation is also fully open source. So the only thing that is closed source is really the interface at the end of the day.
Yeah, good point. We had a question come in from our friend Quentin on how do you prevent the open source and closed source versions from diverging over time? It's a great question.
That's a really great question. So we've been thinking about this actually quite recently, because the Terminal and Terminal Pro are different in a sense. So the Terminal, for instance, it's Python based, and it's a command line interface, whereas like the Terminal Pro is a React app and on the web. And so the way we're thinking about it is that at the core, the Terminal uses the platform. And so basically he has these like Python endpoints that are standardized and aggregating data. And I think that what we're going to do over time is have the Terminal to be a very thin wrapper around the platform, because that's one thing that we realized soon after we launched the Terminal, last year, when we came out and said, or actually 2 years ago almost, when we said like, okay, this is the OpenBB Terminal the first time, people were actually, they were using the Terminal to explore what data they had access, but then they would relate to the SDK, which today we call the platform. So they actually were interested on it just for more exploratory reasons, and then they would use the endpoint to use it in Python to have access to the data because they wanted to do something else with it or export it into an Excel. And so the main value of the open source is actually the platform. Although the Terminal is what people talk the most, the main value is the platform. And then we would make the Terminal to be like a very simple wrapper around that platform endpoint for people that are less technical, because you have just access to the data easily. And then that platform is what powers the Pro. That's at least how we're thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's well thought out on your end. It's obviously something you guys are probably consistently working on in your roadmap and your development.
That's a good question.
Yeah, we had a couple of more questions come in. How does decision making work for you guys at the leadership level? Like, what, you know, how do you guys make decisions and decide on the roadmap and things like that?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so we, yeah, that's hard to reply. So we see a lot of where the community is going. We have now, at the beginning we didn't have as much, so at the beginning was just like mostly relying on the vision. Now we rely a bit more on metrics that we've got, like usage. For instance, the SDK, like building the SDK. When I started the Terminal, it was we were doing a model view controller, right? Because I wanted a Terminal. I was building the endpoints myself, so I wanted just the Terminal. And soon what we realized is that people were actually mostly interested on the SDK. So we kind of changed a bit, like or workflow to incorporate that. The bot story is the same. I didn't plan to write the bot, and then based on the feedback from Macro News, I was like, this is actually a good idea, and now we have a bot. So in terms of decision making, we try to understand like where the market is and where the demand is, and try to understand where that complies with where that fits with the vision of OpenBB. At the end of the day, our vision is to make like investment research accessible to everyone, and we don't want to have just one product that wins, but we want to have like a full ecosystem of products that work together. So you can be on your phone chatting with people and have access to financial data, but you can also use it on the web or on mobile, or you can, you know, so for instance, we started first on the Terminal Pro for enterprise to have allowed to incorporate their data, but soon after talking with them, we realized that they use a lot of Excel, right? I mean, we knew that, right? But that was like a big pull for, okay, how can I get this data into Excel? And so we allowed that on the Terminal Pro. So we allowed them to export data because we actually have redistribution rights for the data that we have there. But what people were interested was actually on being able to automate a bit their Excel templates so that they would just change a ticker on the Excel and all the data would be replaced. And for that, you need something more powerful. And so we're in the process, almost done with the process of building the Excel add-in, which basically means that you have access to all the data that you have on the Pro, and now you can just pull the data directly. And so, yeah, that's a really, like, I think, hard, like, big question. How do we do decision making? But we have this vision, and then based on feedback of where we're going, we try to adapt and change path along the way. But as long as the vision still remains. So if there's something crazy that people ask that doesn't fit the vision, we don't spend time thinking about it because it doesn't make sense.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So one last question on Bloomberg. Do you view them, I mean, because you mentioned earlier that you've got users at Bloomberg, I think. I heard you correctly?
Yes, we've got quite a few users that have used Bloomberg for a lot of years, and we've got someone that was doing machine learning at Bloomberg contributing to our project.
Okay, so do you view Bloomberg as a competitor, as a potential future partner, perhaps, or something else entirely?
Right now, I don't see them as a competitor per se, because we are coming in a way that they don't really do, because again, like, everyone has a Bloomberg, so that's the de facto, and then people have to build like custom apps, and so we are coming on the custom apps angle. But what we're seeing is that the few firms that we are talking with now, they're actually thinking about reducing the number of Bloomberg terminals that they have access to and providing the entire team with the Pro, because the access point, the price point is much lower, and then they can use the Bloomberg for more data, because Bloomberg has all the data, right? Over time, I think that we are going to become competitors, though, as we grow in terms of the value chain, if we allow execution, because the hub already has a network that we've built in. We will be able to create our own chat interface easily if we want, which I don't think is the right thing to do right now, because of like moderation and value. Like, there's not yet the network that we wanted to have. But yeah, over time, I think we'll become more and more competitors.
I agree. You guys will get there. Okay, we're a little bit close on time here. So last question, which is one of mine and also something that somebody in the audience asked. This has been a crazy couple of years to be the founder of a tech company, right? Things have been a little nuts, especially fintech, right? Like, it's been a little brutal out there in terms of what's happening in the capital markets, trading tools, fintech space, crypto crashing, tech crashing. It's not been a normal couple of years to be a founder. So considering all of those challenges in the environment that we're kind of currently in, two-sided question. Number one, what is, in your perspective, the biggest challenge for scaling and growing for you guys? And then secondarily, what are you most excited about kind of for the next year for the platform?
Yeah, so in terms of scaling, I think I felt a lot people starting to go out again from COVID.
Yeah.
I felt like the usage that we had, and I felt talk with other founders about this and the companies, all of them felt the same. There was a time during COVID that everyone was really interested in investing because they were home, they had savings. Some people were getting compensation from like just staying at home and not working, and so a lot of people were starting to trade, and there was this massive influx of capital coming in, and I think that's why it allowed the old GameStop and all of these meme stocks, BlackBerry, to happen. And so yeah, that was an interesting thing, because when COVID started like slowing down and people coming out of it, you really notice the like less activity on forums, on chats, even on Reddit. So that was an interesting point, because I feel like as a founder you tend to do like projections of numbers, and so that was something hard to model, because we thought that was going to grow because people, there's no longer COVID, but people are still going to be interested about their investment, and I think that really wasn't the case. And the other question, for excited for next year, I'm really excited about the Pro. I'm really excited about the pro. Like I talk with firms. I met someone yesterday for a coffee, and they said that he's like a game changer. And the person just said that is something that they want to help, even not being paid. They want to help us like grow this tool and talk with firms that they have access to and a network to basically push it towards them, because I think it's a really good product. And one of the things that I like about it is that, so we have, for instance, AI features. So basically, you can you can ask to summarize the news articles, or ask how this news article impact your investment, or you can upload a PDF and ask questions to it, or you can create like full workflows with agents. And the thing I like about it is that we didn't build something on AI just for the sake of it. We built like a really strong app, and then we build AI in a few angles that it makes sense to make people more efficient and productive on their workflow. And so I'm really proud of what we put out. And like when I use it, I'm like, we've been 1 year developing this, but damn, like I'm proud of the team for this.
Well, that's super exciting. I mean, that's the corner for you guys to turn, right? From the open source to the closed source, from the retail to the institutional, from the only open source risk of not making money to monetizing in a brand new way next year. So that's a really exciting corner to turn. Gonna definitely be keeping eyes on you guys. Will Didier and OpenBB be the future terminal in the institutional space? We will see, but it sounds like you guys are well on your way. So super exciting. Thank you for sharing all of this candid advice and information with everybody. You've built a really intriguing business, and it's going to be fun to watch you guys grow. So thank you so much, DDA, for joining us. Thank you to the attendees.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and stay tuned because we'll do another one of these next month in the new year. And have a great rest of the day, everybody.